morning, everyone, and welcome to this special coverage of Radio Sidney, coming to you live from the Cenotaph here in Sidney, British Columbia. I'm Michael Short, and this morning I'll be joined by Michael Williamson. We will be bringing you, as I said, special coverage of the Remembrance Day celebration here, of course, reflecting on the men and women who have served in the Canadian forces since World War I, right through the Afghanistan War and many peacekeeping efforts across the world. Kind of a little special way that we're going to be doing this on this broadcast is that we will be spending some time with some veterans, some local veterans. We'll be spending some time out at the British Columbia Aviation Museum and reflect on what they look like back during the Second World War. And we'll also hear from some kids on their thoughts. But right now, real pleasure to bring in Mike Williamson, retired naval captain and former base commander at Esquimalt. Mike, thanks so much for doing this, and great to have you back again.
Thanks, Michael. Always an honor to be here. These are very important occasions right here in Sydney. Sydney's communities like Sydney play very vital roles. Families sending sons and daughters overseas, shipyards supporting the Navy, as you mentioned, the Air Force and the Air Base, and legions right there, keeping memories alive. And our local cenotaphs listing all the names that still echo through the families here on the South.
Well, speaking of the Cenotaph, things are starting to build here. We've got an outstanding turnout, and you commented it's probably one of the first Remembrance Day celebrations you've been to where it hasn't been inclement weather, and what a treat that is.
Absolutely. I can remember many times saluting and feeling the rain running down my sleeve and into the rest of me, so it's a bit of a pleasure here. Of course, our men and women overseas fought under terrible conditions, so we have to put that into balance as we approach our 11th hour on 11th day, 11th month, where we'll pause for 2 minutes of silence to remember that.
We are at that time, I guess, now where when you look back at those who served in the Second World War, those are folks that are getting into their mid-90s, some of them even over 100. So we're starting to lose that special generation, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. My father, case in point, joined the military when he was 15, served till he was 55, and recently passed away when he was 95. And he was in many conflicts during that time, and his memories are now carried on with me and my own children.
You, of course, spent many years in the Royal Canadian Navy, as I mentioned off the top, former base commander at Esquimalt. Mike, reflect back on your service time and any special stories stand out for you.
So I was in the Canadian Navy, as you mentioned. I was a naval officer, combat systems engineer, served time in submarines on the East Coast, did some work overseas below the waves, as I like to say, on, in, and under the sea, and then on the West Coast in CFB Esquimalt. As I mentioned earlier, it wasn't always just the folks going overseas, it's the folks back at home supporting those going to sea. I think one of the things that stands out for me the most is just the commitment of our men and women in uniform, working hard, extra hours, often without any kind of recognition, and just getting the job done to try and keep us safe here at home and projecting Canadian values.
Of course, when we go back to the Second World War, almost 1 million people put on a uniform and went to war. As we move forward into more modern times, we have more and more disconnect, I guess, from the general population to the military. What's the best way in terms of engaging those Canadians that don't have a direct tie?
I think it's going to be a continuation of events just like this, bringing some of the memories close at home so that the remembrance isn't just living history. It becomes more than a memory, and we're able to apply it to our everyday lives and understand that we all have needs to contribute to the benefit of our country and what we do to keep it a safe community.
All right. Well, at this point, I think we should maybe talk about that connection to Canadians who are not wearing a uniform. It's really quite unique to get the concepts of Remembrance Day to our younger people. And I had an opportunity earlier this week to sit down with some local scouts to get their impressions of what Remembrance Day means to them. What does it mean to you?
Remembering the people who fought in war, sacrificed, and fought for us.
And why do you think that's important to remember?
So we can, go back, make sure we don't make the same mistakes.
As our nation of Canada has served in both World Wars, including Vietnam, peacekeeping in numerous countries, and we have sacrificed and done a great ordeal in world peace. And it's important for even youth organizations, specifically ones in uniform, to partake and remember who secured freedom for us today.
I would tell them it's a day about when it was a world war and we had to fight for it and everyone that died. To remember about all the soldiers who fought to protect us.
It's definitely interesting to hear like all the stories and such. And it's nice that we have a day to, honor those who have fallen in those times, and to think about how nice it is that we are now in times of peace and we don't have to worry about war as much now.
Yeah, I think it's great to be in touch with our history and whatnot, all the wars that have happened, and understand and not fall into the same mistakes of history.
I mean, it's a very important day. It's kind of a way to remember the history of Canada, right? And what the people did for our country. And so it's a very important time to remember the past of the country and the people who fought for us.
Quite frankly, if it weren't for the people who are remembering, there probably wouldn't be a Remembrance Day. And I think it's important for us to realize that all of our amazing privileges living in this country come from these great sacrifices from men and women serving in uniform.
And I guess it's on that note, Mike, that the youth really are a key audience in carrying the Remembrance Day message forward.
100%, and they'll be the soldiers, sailors, and airmen and women of the future. It's good to see that more schools and youth groups take part in ceremonies like that, and it's encouraging to see the new generations learning not just their history, but the human stories behind medals and memories. And Remembrance Day's evolved from veterans remembering comrades to families and newcomers and young Canadians reflecting on what service means today. It's no longer just about past wars, it's about the peace that we maintain and the unity we value.
Of course, one of the things that has changed over in recent times really is the acknowledgement of First Nations and Indigenous soldiers, sailors, and airmen and women that have served. We're getting a bit of a flyover here, fantastic, adds to the ambiance. But talk a little bit about Canada's shift in recognizing First Nations service.
100%. So more than 12,000 Indigenous men and women served in the First and Second Wars and Korea, and they were volunteered even before they were recognized as Canadian citizens. And their courage, from Micmac snipers, Cree Scouts, Métis pilots, Inuit guides, form a proud but often overlooked chapter of our military history. And there's some interesting things too. Last year and this year we talk about Canada's code talkers. They had Cree soldiers using, in both both world wars using their native languages, and they were never able to be decoded because it was an unwritten language and it served them very, very well. And these linguistic warriors turned culture into a weapon for freedom, and it was a remarkable blend of both identity and service.
Of course, Mike, when we hear the bugle sound and we go into that moment of silence, I think one of the things a lot of veterans try and do is remember the names, remember who they served with, whether they've passed away from a battlefield or on a battlefield. In your mind, what are some of the things that you recall?
Well, you're absolutely correct about the names, and that's one of the purposes that cenotaphs serve. And even out by the airport on the bike path, there's a memorial in the shape of arrows and feathers that record the names of the folks. And nowadays, things like Facebook. I belong to some veterans Facebook groups, and they're always checking on each other and recalling stories. And as we all get older, people disappear and leave, and it's important to keep those memories alive as well.
It absolutely is, and again, I'm just blown away. More and more people are showing up for
Canada and the protection of our values.
Well, as we await the beginning of the celebration here, we're going to take a trip. Actually, we're going to turn things over to the Master of Ceremonies, I believe, at this time, and let them carry the day. Actually, I did hear that a former CDS is going to be on hand, John Anderson, Admiral Anderson.
Yeah, he's a great guy.
I imagine you had some dealings with him back in the day.
Served with him a few times and met him out here on Wayne Road, so absolutely, yeah, that'll be nice to see him again. And that's what Remembrance Day is all about, living memories as well.
It is so cool. You know, you may not even know individuals, but when you see somebody that is wearing some medals, they have a past connection to the military. Nice to say hi and maybe have a quick conversation.
And common ethos. I was in South Africa and met a fellow naval officer down there that I didn't know before, and the stories and the instant connection is something quite interesting to see.
All right, I think we're just going to soak in the ambience here, and always nice to hear the pipes come in.
Welcome, everyone. We acknowledge that we assemble on the traditional territories of the Cenotaph peoples. We are here to commemorate and honor the fallen, those men and women who gave their all, who paid the ultimate sacrifice in past wars and conflicts. 2025 is an important year to remember the 80th anniversary of the end of the Second World War, and also the 25th anniversary of the opening of the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier in Ottawa. Please rise. Rachel Moss will now lead us in singing our national anthem, O Canada.
1887 in Portsmouth, England. 2nd Division Canadian Engineers. Killed in action August 8, 1916, age 28 years. James Arden, H.H. Bedford, V. Cleves, G.J. Coward, C.J. Coos, Arnold Dean, H.A. Dennis, C.R. Gillen, Private Herbert Ranger, born October 17, 1891, when enlisted was living at Keene on Vancouver Island. Killed in action May 19, 1915, age 23 years. His mother is a Memorial Cross recipient. Team Holiday, Team Ivinson, F.C. John, W.S.J. Late. Lance Corporal John Edward McNally, born the 14th of April, 1895, enlisted the 18th of February, 1916, from Sanishton, BC. Killed in action, Vinnie Ridge, 13th of June, 1917, age 22 years. L.H. Norris, I. Robinson, C.F. Stutchbury, Private Charles James Tugel, born 23rd of March 1887, enlisted the 15th of November 1915, from Cenotaph, BC. Killed in action 11th of November 1916, age 24 years. His brother, F. Tugel, killed in action. E.M. Williamson. These are the names of our fallen heroes from World War II. Jane V.G. Butler, J.F. Bean, F. Carter, J.B.C. Chapman, W. Davidson, B. Frame, T. Bolden, A.M. Knott, V.H. Graham, W.J. Gunn, B.H. Harcourt, L. Hager, A. Hunter, S. Jackson, Peter B. Woodward, M. Gilbert,
Canadian Scottish Regiment, Princess Mary's, placed by Captain Pat Griffin. Royal Canadian Legion Branch 27, placed by President Shelton. Army, Navy, Air Force of Sydney, number 302, placed by President Henry. Sidney BC. I will continue to read the list of donors, but these days please wait in line. Some lists are already too late for emergency staff that will post the donors. Canada Border Services Agency. Naval Officers Association. Royal United Services Institute. The Stonewall Military Family Resource Center. Admiral Wells Chief Cadet. Admiral Martin Navy Cadet. City Hall Cadets. Royal Canadian Marine Search and Rescue. BC Ferries. Victoria Airport Authority. Sydney Volunteer Fire Department. North Sydney Volunteer Fire Department. Victoria Airport Fire Department. School District 63. Observer Party of Canada, produced by Kathy Monson. Beacon Community Association, singing of the Royal Anthem.
Mike, again, I can't, even when I was in Edmonton and some of the other locations where I've served and gone to Remembrance Day celebrations, I really can't remember a crowd this large.
Well, it was nice to see, as you said, how many people did turn out today, and it was a very respectful crowd, and the ceremony came off without any hitch. And from Vimy Ridge to Kandahar, the constant in our soldiers has been courage, and the constant here has been ordinary citizens coming out, answering calls, giving us their support, showing what it really means to them as well.
Of course, I mentioned that there are members of the Canadian forces here that were represented, including 443, the helicopter squadron based out of Pat Bay, and we're going to get a little more information about Pat Bay and its role during the Second World War, but also a naval contingent, of course, that a big part here in Sydney and Victoria.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's good to see that Victoria does host the three services. The Army had a very large presence here with PPCLI, and they've been restructured, of course, but we do have good representation here.
All right. Well, speaking of veterans, we're going to take a step away from our live coverage and go to a interview I did that's going to, I guess, introduce you to a couple of local veterans.
I guess first off, talk a little bit about what brought you to a point where you decided you wanted to put a uniform on.
Sure. I was born and raised in Powell River in coastal BC. My parents always had a boat, and we spent a lot of our time on the water. As a teenager, I was a sea cadet and have many, many fond memories of parading and sailing, and the camaraderie of being a teenager with other teenagers, having lots of fun. Those experiences, and as well as the number of former Powell Riverites that went to Royal Roads and joined the Navy, seemed like the logical place to go. If I hadn't joined the Navy, I would have worked in the pulp mill.
Given the fact that you were off island and you joined the Navy to do, I guess, was it the lure of the travel, and if so, where did it take you?
Sure, it was certainly the lure of the travel, the desire to get away from a isolated, coastal community and see the world. I saw the world, and I've seen Canada, over my 31 plus year career. I've been lucky enough to serve on both Canada's coasts, Esquimalt and Halifax. My shore duties took me to Kingston and Toronto, and my final postings before I retired took me down to Colorado Springs with North American Aerospace Defense Command, and finally in Washington, D.C. at the Pentagon. But the greater adventure is obviously going to places a little farther afield. So I've been in my career of service to every continent except Antarctica. I've certainly sailed throughout the Atlantic, the Caribbean, Asia Pacific, Oceania. On operations, I did 2 missions to the Persian Gulf at sea in 1990-91 during the first Gulf War, and then in 2002-2003, Canada didn't contribute to, but Canada did support planning for a Canadian possible contribution to the war against Iraq. So we were forward deployed to Qatar in the Gulf, and served 2 missions in Haiti at sea in the early 90s. And probably my most professionally fulfilling duty would have been in Cambodia in the early 1990s, serving as a United Nations military observer.
We see aging veterans now. We have lost the veterans of World War I, World War II, and I dare say probably a lot of the Korean War. So with that, do you feel that Remembrance Day itself has shifted in terms of the message it needs to get out?
Well, I think the message is enduring. I mean, it's a day of solemn reflection on those who've served Canada in peace and war, but I think it's also a transformational moment. The threats today may not be the Hitlers and the Mussolinis. Maybe there's future iterations of those, but we're also in a place of, climate challenge. I mean, that is an existential threat. And I think we need to be asking ourselves, in this really complex calculus of human dynamics, resource exploitation, discrepancy between wealth and poor, what is conflict, and what can I do to serve in some way, shape, or form. So to me, I mean, there is a transformational force at work here. And I think our challenge, everybody's challenge, is to kind of reconcile their own personal and moral ethics and consider what contribution they can make to make our small planet a better place for tomorrow.
To that end, I mean, obviously we look to the youth that are going to move us in that forward direction. Is there a role that they should be playing maybe more in when it comes to Remembrance Day? Are we hitting the right tone with them? I mean, nobody likes to dwell on the past armed conflicts, obviously, but and with us disappearing at an alarming rate, how do we endure that memory to them, or should we even be trying? You make a great point that the world threat is maybe taking on wearing different clothing.
I think the message is stay informed, be informed, challenge assumptions, hunt for facts, draw your own conclusions from the best possible advice you can, and be a witness into this window into the past, which Remembrance Day is, and critically think about what people did, freely of their own free will in many cases, and ask yourself, what is the contribution that you could make to make this a better place. Are so many challenges out there, and while the mere act of remembrance, and I don't mean to be flippant, it's backwards looking in some respects to reflect on somberly on those that have served, but I think it's an opportunity to think about what could the future look like and what's my place in that future.
Much that we need to learn from our history, and sometimes I question whether we're truly paying attention to that.
No, it's a fair comment. An act of remembrance is a very individual sport. We may all come together on this particular day, in somber reflection, but I really truly hope that people take the opportunity to reflect. It's a few minutes out of the day. You're commemorating those that have made the ultimate sacrifice, but also use it as a forward-looking opportunity, to ask yourselves, what can you do for a better tomorrow?
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
And right now we are going to take a little bit of a road trip. We're going to be heading over to the British Columbia Aviation Museum, where we caught up with Steve Hale. He's the president of the museum, and it's kind of a different twist. I mean, Sidney and, of course, the airport area played a critical role during the Second World War. Steve, I guess first of all, take us back to the late 1930s, 1940s. What was this area like in terms of its war preparation?
Well, at that time, of course, hostilities had already begun in Europe, and the British had an expeditionary force over in France to help them against the German aggression, and that sprung to life the need to have a safe place for their pilot training and all aircrew training. So you couldn't get any safer from a war in Europe than Vancouver Island. So they came here, started up their training plan, later to be called the Commonwealth Air Training Plan.
What type of aircraft were operating out of the base?
Here they had quite a few different aircraft. One of the major ones, though, was the PBY Catalina. In Canada, we called them Cansos. and they would be floating around in Pat Bay nearby. Their function was to patrol and to assist in search and rescue. Also here we had the Avro Ansons, which were multi-crew training. They could train navigators, they could train bombardiers, pilots, radio operators.
What was life like, I guess, for all those folks that came from, basically Commonwealth countries around the world that would gather in these British Commonwealth air training plan bases? What was the life like for the airmen and maybe even some of the women that came?
Well, you know, I'd have to admit I'm old, but I'm not as old as that. No, you have to imagine that Vancouver Island was a completely different place than what you see now in the 30s. It would have been very sparse, very, very lacking in entertainment, culture, and those sorts of activities. But they did have Mary's across the street, which is still there today, as a pub and restaurant. The Europeans would have been disappointed by the lack of population. Probably the food was pretty barren as well, but they did have outdoor activities that they could have participated in. I think the morale was quite high.
And just how important was this base for the Allied efforts during the war?
Oh, it was huge. The consideration for a defense against a Japanese attack was always on the cards, although it didn't manifest itself until 1941. They always thought that could happen. There was that kind of an alliance. So having a front here to discover and ward off any Japanese attacks was very important. The Japanese did send submarines over here. We had P-40s here that dealt with the Fugo bombs that came over. They actually shot down a couple. Yeah, it was very important, quite a spearheaded area.
So by the time the war ended, we probably started to see more people come out to this part of the country. What led to the development of a civilian airport along with a military presence as we moved further down the timeline?
Well, during World War II, over 10,000 aircrew were trained here, and that exposure to this wonderful spot that we call home would bring an awful lot of people back here. There was really no military presence here, I think, after 1952. So then, with this well-established and hard-surfaced airfield, they actually found it useful for civilian travel to get people to and from here. It was very important at that time, and it still is. And it's growing in its importance as the population increases.
As a Royal Canadian Air Force veteran yourself, a flyer of a number of different aircraft, Steve, how important is it for the history of flight, not just militarily, but with a connection to the BC coast and the work that you're doing here at the museum? How important is that to be preserved?
You know, it's essential. We always learn from the past. History is the foundation of what we're currently living on, and to keep it maintained, I think, is an essential task. Here at the museum, I look at it as our mandate. We have a responsibility to maintain and preserve wartime artifacts. This is no exception. We've been very meticulous. We've had this for 7 years. It doesn't look like we've done a whole lot. Come back in the summer of 27 and we'll have it assembled and sitting outside. It's very important. We spend a lot of time, a lot of money. Our dedicated staff, we have 210 volunteers.
Right now, a real pleasure to be
singularly
joined by Tyson
dedicated
King.
to the
He is
notion
a
of
former
preservation.
Canadian Forces
Steve,
member.
thanks so much for this.
And
Oh, my pleasure.
maybe something a little bit different. We're not really going to dwell a lot on Remembrance Day in this conversation. We're going to be delving a little bit more into, well, as bad as it sounds, the casualty of being a member in the Canadian Forces and talking a bit about PTSD. Talk a little bit about your military background. What drew you to the military in the first place?
Well, as a kid, I started out as air cadets way back at 15. I quickly moved up, but I aged out at 18. And being in Saskatoon, I initially looked for joining the Air Reserve, but being in grade 12, the closest Air Reserve was in Edmonton. So I wasn't able to, they offered me for me to move to Edmonton to join the Air Reserve. And I didn't want to do that in my grade 12 year. So I then went into the recruiting center and got me hook, line, and sinker to join the infantry because I like camping. And in November of '95, I switched from the reserve to Reg Force because I'd already done 2 tours back to back. I'd already become a master corporal and on my way, but I tried to go for the third tour. The tour was canceled, and so I decided to remain with second battalion. Just transferred over from reserve to regular force. And second battalion was in Winnipeg at the time, so I went Reg Force infantry at the time. In 1999, I switched over to uh, I was a stoker, and I went from CFB Winnipeg to HMCS Winnipeg. But my PTSD put the end to my career in 2016. It emerged in 2014, and I was actually the first serving member out here on the West Coast to get a service dog especially for PTSD.
Obviously, you're wearing a number of different hats. You're the sergeant at arms for the parade commander in essence, and you're also a member of the Canadian Legion. Talk a little bit about what it's like and the importance of the Legion.
We're helping each other, especially the younger generation, supporting them. The Legion was first brought about after World War II to try and get the government to do what they were supposed to do to support the veterans. And over time, that mission has had its ups and downs because I come from the generation where it wasn't until PTSD became evident that peacekeepers were recognized as veterans in the 90s. And that unfortunately did a lot of damage to my generation of veterans. And since then, a lot of other splinter veteran organizations started up because they weren't being supported by the Legion at that time. Well, we've been making great efforts to try and heal those issues and so forth. And the latest current thing is that I'm trying to spur the Legion to be more active in fighting veteran affairs to fund service dogs for veterans. 2 years ago, I was invited with a bunch of the Legion members to do a tour of the new helicopter squadron facilities. I could only last there 30 minutes. It caught me off guard. My service dog extracted me from that environment because of how triggered I was getting. But I'm far enough in my healing process, and unfortunately, you cannot heal 100% from PTSD. It's always going to be there, but you just have to develop different coping mechanisms. And I'm lucky I no longer require medication and so forth, right? But everybody's different. But with my walk through those injuries, every PTSD casualty is different, but we do have similarities. It gives me the ability to relate, to understand, and hopefully mentor other people that are going through traumatic events and trying to heal from them. It gives a sense of not just empathy, but a connection to them. And knowing that, because you can't, just like autism, with autism, they're so specific. If you've seen one autistic child, you've seen one autistic child because they're so unique. PTSD is very much similar. We all have been traumatized somewhat differently. We react and we respond differently. We recover differently. So it's very important for a service dog to be trained specifically for that person's needs in the manner that's helpful for them. I'm not a believer where you get a pre-trained dog or let the dog just naturally acquire the skills as some other organizations do. No, these dogs are life-saving, and the people that are relying on them, there is a significant risk to self-harm and potentially taking one's life. it's vital that these dogs are trained properly. And I'm speaking from firsthand experience.
Tyson, thank you very much for your time today. We really appreciate it. And from a personal perspective, I want to wish you the best of luck in your endeavors to get canine dogs into the lives of our former Canadian Forces members who suffer from PTSD. Thanks again. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Just one more way that many of us veterans, once we retire, a lot of us continue service in other fashions. And this is just one way that we do it. The Legion members and so forth, ANAVETS and various other organizations where we continue to try and help our society and our communities.
There are times that we want to forget, like when troubles and sadness we've met. But this day in November, we'll always remember the heroes to whom we're in debt. They were young, full of life and ambition, but some dreams never reached their fruition. With their lives put on hold, they were daring and bold and accomplished their difficult mission. Returned when the battle had ended, some with wounds that cried out to be mended, while others did not, having died where they fought to ensure our home was defended. But in spirit they'll always be here, to our hearts they will always be near. Our eyes will be wet, 'cause we'll never forget. Let's remember each day of the year. War is with us again on this day. We have daughters and sons in the fray, so let's wish them Godspeed. Give us the wisdom that we'll need, so they'll never again go away. There are times we should never forget, even troubles and sadness we've met. But this day in November, we'll always remember the heroes to whom we're in debt. But this day in November, we'll always